This is Marcus Borg from the VAKEN Radio. We have Griffin here. He's a writer, documentary film producer, and founder of Freedom Force. And he covered many topics like the Federal Reserve and so on. And I would like to ask Mr. Griffin what people in Sweden who know about the globalist system and the Federal Reserve and like 9/11 truth and so on, when they have this information and they know what's going on, what can they do about it except talking about it and learning more?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's the same all over the world. We have essentially the same problems and the same frustrations, and there comes a point when you decide, well, we have to quit talking about it and take action. And the question is, what kind of action? Writing to your congressman or to your legislator and writing letters to the editor and all of that sort of thing is what usually comes to mind, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that it doesn't really get to the heart of the issue, and it doesn't usually produce results, because the same people are in charge after you've done that were in charge before, and they really don't care what you think. They just as soon that you be asleep, but they really don't care if you're awake either, because they know that you don't have the power. Most people, we just don't have the power to stand up against them. And that's because they are in positions of authority, they have political power, they have control in the media, they have financial power through the banking system and so forth. And you know, they're in the educational system, and they kind of laugh at the people that are waking up to what they're doing, because they know that they're helpless. So the reason that we created Freedom Force International back in the year 2002 was to address that problem. The problem is that those of us who want to create a better world for our future and for our children, our grandchildren, have to have power. We have to reach for power. And, just sitting on the sideline and looking in the windows of authority, the windows of power, and saying, oh, please, those of you who make these decisions, won't you be good? Won't you do what is right and follow our wishes? So that doesn't work. We have to get into the halls of power ourselves and then let other people come to us and say, won't you please do this and so forth. And until we do that, nothing is going to change. And so what the people in Sweden can do is the same as what the people in America can do and everywhere in the world, and that is to reach out into the communities and become active in what are called the power centers of society. Those are the groups, the organizations that people work through, or they belong to, and they're the ones that have the ability to affect the political course of a nation. Those groups are, we'll start with political parties, for example. They're the organizations that control labor unions. They're the organizations that are effective in the media. There are organizations that are in education and so forth. These are the power centers of society, and if you look at them, the ones that are in existence to now, invariably, the people at the heads of those organizations are a very special breed of people. They have this goal in mind. They know and understand the value. They've worked very hard to achieve it, and they're going to use it to bring about their agenda. And their agenda is what they call the New World Order. It's a giant system of government, control from the top down, small people, big government, with themselves in charge, of course. That's their goal, and they understand the mechanism of acquiring control through these power centers, and so they're there. They've worked diligently over the years to get there, while most of us have been just reading our newspapers and saying, my, isn't that terrible? What are they doing? Well, now we understand what the challenge is, and people all over the world now are coming together, helping each other, organizing to take back the control of these power centers. This is a long-term proposition. It's not going to happen quickly, but it can happen. I think it's going to take perhaps a generation, maybe two, which is a very slow process, but there's no other way. You can't just immediately go in and do that. It takes a long time, but we've started. The journey has begun, and it can be done, and we've seen evidence of success, great victories here and there already. People are reaching out and acquiring positions of authority and building that network of freedom. So that's the message, and we don't have a lot of time to go into details, but I urge that anybody that's interested in participating in this crusade, they're going to take a very serious look at what we've put together at Freedom Force. And we're on the Internet. The way to get to our site is www.freedomforceinternational.org. That's freedomforceinternational.org. You're going to find a lot of information there, and I think anybody that's given much thought to this challenge is going to like very much what they see.
I have a friend, I only met him over the internet because he doesn't live in Sweden. He translated many of your text into Swedish, and I can put them up also on a webpage. So,
wonderful,
the
wonderful.
people who don't know so good English, they can read information anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you for that.
Yes, and it would be good if some people could listen to this interview and come together in different cities and start talking about these issues.
Yes, and part of the key here is that Freedom Force is not an organization like any other. Most organizations come together and they want to accomplish whatever their goal is as that organization. That's why they formed it, and let's say the YMCA or whatever organization they want to work in that structure. We understand in Freedom Force that Freedom Force itself cannot really accomplish this massive goal because there's so much diversity and you can't get everybody together on the same page. They have different interests, different outlooks, different styles, different culture, different languages. Everything is different. As long as they can agree on the basic principles of freedom, what we want to do is have our members go into other organizations and become influential and active in those organizations where the people already are, like in the labor unions, as I said, in the political parties and so forth. Not as Freedom Force, but in those other organizations. And that's how it works. So it's an interesting challenge. No one has ever tried this before, at least on our side. The enemies of freedom have always known this. They've always tried to go into the power centers of society and take them over and use them for their own purposes. We're just trying to reverse that process and take the political power away from those people so that we hold it not for our personal agenda, not for our own purposes, but for the principles of freedom in which we believe. And that's why we have a code of conduct and a creed of freedom. You'll see that on the website. Very important statements of ideology and philosophy, because those are the things we have to agree with. We have to all know what we're for as well as what we're against, so that when we do succeed, we won't just create some other system that's just the same as every other program of power, except that we're in charge instead of the other guys. That's not what we have in mind. We want to make sure that the people who are in our movement, they themselves don't become corrupted and don't abuse the power that they hold in society. So it's a really interesting and an extremely exciting challenge.
Yeah, I agree, and I think in Sweden and Europe, a good step would be to if you get one of the EU members to leave the Union, maybe it's going to start dissolving, because European Union is now controlling basically 80 or 90% of Swedish law, and even on the local level they have EU directives. And they try to merge Sweden, Denmark into like a new region that's going to be ruled by the EU, and they try to cut up the countries in different regions, and it's hard to follow what they're doing because it's thousands of pages every month of new bureaucratic text, and it's hard to even know what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's the challenge everywhere in the world, and it's a big challenge, but it can be done. The good news is that it can be done. The bad news is it's slow, and it's not going to happen in the next year or two. But if you have the long view of history, it's very encouraging to know that we do have the solution.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin. If you have any last closing words, you can give them now to the audience. Well,
I'd like to close just by leaving a thought with one of our little unofficial slogans, which is over here in this country, a lot of people say you can't fight City Hall. Don't try and fight City Hall; you always lose. Well, we've taken that phrase and turned it around a little bit. We say, don't fight City Hall, become City Hall.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
Mr. Griffin.
And goodbye.